Yeah, but it's turning very toxic.
And let's get the meeting going. Social Development Standing Committee of Provincial Parliament. And let me use the opportunity to welcome all of you, all our members, also all our officials, but I would allow all the members and officials to identify themselves, but I'm going to do exactly the same for our visitors as well. And we are very pleased to welcome visitors from KwaZulu-Natal. I don't want trouble with the KwaZulu-Natal colleagues, but needless to say that they are in the most beautiful province in South Africa. And I welcome the delegation from the second most beautiful province in South Africa. But yeah, all our members. Let's start on my left, Councillor Honourable Fry. You do the honours first.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, officials. Good morning, everybody. My name is Christopher Fry. I'm a member of this committee.
Good morning, Deirdre Bartman, alternate member.
Good morning, Gillian Postman.
Could the officials on the side do the same, please?
Good morning, Chair and members. Charles Jordan. I'm the Chief Director for the Department of Social Development. Children, Families and Vulnerable Groups is my portfolio. Thanks.
Good morning, members and visitors. Leana Goosen from the Department of Social Development, Chief Director, Social Welfare and Restorative Services.
Good morning, Chairperson and honourable members and visitors and colleagues. Robert MacDonald, Head of Social Development in the Western Cape.
Good morning, everyone. Chair, honourable members and our visitors. I'm Zwandile, Chief Director for Community and Partnership Development in the Department of Social Development. Thank you.
And may I ask our dear friends, our colleagues, that they do the same. I'm not sure who's the leader of the team and that sort of thing, but it doesn't matter for me right now. All of us are honourable members, and that is how we will address you as honourable. Welcome once more. And let's start with the lady here in front and to that side, name, surname, and maybe your portfolio and that sort of thing. We would love that. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's my lucky day. My name is Mabatsu Dembe, and I sit on I'm the spokesperson for social development in our province and for quality of life, and I'm our caucus spokesperson. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Bradley Singh, Sports, Arts and Culture for KZN. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Martin Meyer, Chairperson, and I sit in the doctor myself.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. My name is Evan Babsy, and I'm.
Thank you.
Morning, Chairperson, and greetings to everyone. I'm Imran Kika, the Education Spokesperson for KwaZulu-Natal. I'm also the Chief Whip of my caucus and therefore serve on the relative committees pertaining to the whippery.
Thank you. You could just raise and thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Balain Daya, and I'm the GAPZ spokesperson, Governments and Public Works.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Without any further ado from my side, we having quite a packed program. After this meeting, another meeting, and then another one around 1 o'clock. And then we would love to spend some time with the KwaZulu-Natal delegation later this afternoon. So are we going to get right into the business? We're here to talk about the monitoring, evaluation, and that sort of things about NGOs. And we are very pleased to have our head of department with us this morning, Minister Shana Fernandez. I receive a notice she's not all well. So we table Minister Shana Fernandez' apology officially. But the HOD and his chief directors are here. I'm not sure who's going to lead. Maybe the HOD himself. Maybe you want to do introductory remarks and hand over to your spokesperson. Thank you, HOD.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Yes, I'm going to ask our Chief Director for Children, Families and Vulnerable Groups to present. And then we'll see what further questions arise from the presentation. But I think the overall picture is that we have a well-established monitoring team in the department, but their capacity is limited. considering the numbers of NGOs we need to monitor in the province, it means that they maybe don't always get to all the NGOs as often as we might like them to, but it's always about striking a balance between how much we spend on staff to monitor the NGOs and how much money we give to the NGOs. And we have to try and strike that balance between service delivery and governance. And that's, I think, hopefully what we'll be discussing today. So I'll hand over to Mr. Jordan to present. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. You may proceed.
Thank you, HOD and Chair. Yeah, so we're talking about the monitoring and evaluation processes within the Department of Social Development. And just by me to start off that, we have a transfer budget of almost 1.1 billion rand that we spend on our NGOs in the Western Cape Province. To this end, the monitoring of the funds that we allocate and the intervention supported by these funds, we do regard as a very important function to monitor funding that goes to the NGOs and compliance issues. So we have officials that's permanently appointed and dedicated in each program of the Department of Social Development. So if you look at the budget structure, you look at program 2, 3, 4, and 5. So in those programs, we've got dedicated monitoring officials that is allocated to those programs. Now, our monitoring processes is being implemented in terms of our own departmental following policies, policies following the following. So we've got a standard operating procedure specifically for monitoring and evaluation of NGOs. And that one has been done in 2017, but it will be reviewed very soon. Then also we've got a DSD policy on the funding of NGOs. And in other words, how do we fund the NGOs according to what procedures, who's responsible for what functions with the allocation of funding and the contracting of NGOs. We've reviewed that DSD funding policy to NGOs in the beginning of this financial year, so it's been reviewed. And then, of course, we have contracts between the department and the NGOs. So in the Western Cape Province, we don't refer to it as SLAs, service level agreements. We refer it as transfer payment agreements, short for TPAs. If I look at the budgets and the expenditure up to date of our NGOs and programs, so we've got about 10 programs. So our care and services to families, we've got 107 million rand budget, and we've spent up to mid-year 48 million rand. Child and youth care centres, we've got about 52 of them that we fund. We've got a budget of 119 million rand, of which we spend about 58 million rand in midterm. Then we've got the childcare protection program. There we've got almost a 200 million rand budget, and we've spent so far 104 million rand by mid-year. Then we've got a program, crime prevention and support, which has got a budget of 17 million rand, 17, and we've spent so far 8 million rand. Then, although the ECD function has shifted to the Department of Education, we've still got an ECD and partial care component by DSD, and that specifically is the after schools. So the after school centres, according to the functionality shift, that was one part of ECDs that did not go to the Department of Basic Education. So we still got that program, and we've got a budget of about 18 million rand, and we've spent about 7 million. Then we've got a program, poverty alleviation and sustainable livelihood. There's a budget of almost 54 million rand, and so far 24 million has been spent. Then our program services to older persons, we've got a budget of 255 million, and we've spent so far already 118 million. Then our program persons with disabilities, we've got 164 million rand budget, and we've spent 78 million so far. And then we've got substance abuse prevention rehabilitation program. Their budget is 58 million, and we spent 28 million. Then we've got a victim empowerment program with 71 million budget, and we spent so far 33 million. And then youth development programs got a 14 million rand budget, and we've spent so far 7 million. So of the 1.06 billion budget, we've spent so far 516 million. So we're above the 50% average spending rate, which is within our projections for the rest of the financial year. Now, DSD funds, monitors, and we assist approximately 1,200 NGOs that we contracted. 2 years ago, it was 2,300 when the ECDs were still with us. That was about 1,000 contracts all by itself. That's gone over to Education Department. In the Western Cape, we do our monitoring either annually or within a 3-year cycle. And if there's any questions about that, I could explain that later. The terms for monitoring is set out in our transfer payment agreement. So in the transfer payment agreement, we will indicate if we pay you quarterly or monthly, and we also indicate the period of when you must submit your documentation and reports. In our department, the number of officials that's involved with monitoring, we've got about 11 assistant directors monitoring. That is the middle middle management, and they supervise 24 administrative monitoring officers and 14 social worker monitoring officers. So maybe just explain, why do we have a combined team? So if we do monitoring at an NGO, you have at least 2 people going to the NGO to do a site visit or whatever. The monitoring official, administrative monitoring official, is the one that will assess the finance and governance of that NGO. So it's financial compliance, it's looking at the financial systems, they look at expenditure, they look at if there's invoices, if there's systems in place for specifically the funds that DSD has allocated to them. We do not look at the funds of other sources. So, for example, if an NGO gets money from the lotto or private donors, we do not look at that money, since we don't have a mandate to look at that money. Then the social workers that goes in the team is specifically social workers that's got to do the monitoring of norms and standards according to legislation. So, for example, let's take a childcare and protection organization. So you would have a social worker going with the monitoring officer, looking specifically at the norms and standards of the Children's Act. So if a child has, for example, been removed and a child has been placed in alternative care, we will do spot check on files, and that social worker will then go through the file to look at the process notes if the correct procedures have been followed by that organization, so that we can then also advise them if we pick up something wrong, or alternatively also encourage them. So as Dr. McDonald has indicated earlier, although we've got these amount of staff, 24 monitoring officers and 14 social workers, it's not an ideal situation because we would have loved to have more. But at the end of the day, if you look at the ratios, you have 1 staff member equal to 25 NGOs. It seems maybe not too much, but the M&E process takes at least 3 to 4 days. There's a lot of preparatory work before, a lot of stuff that needs to be looked at, the business plans of the organization, they're going back on the history of the organization before the monitoring, and then the physical site visit can take up to 4 days. So it's the assistant directors are not necessarily the ones that do the monitoring themselves. The admin officer and the social workers usually under the supervision of this assistant director monitoring. The monitoring and evaluation teams utilize various tools. So we've got various monitoring tools and methods to assess NGOs. So the first one that we do every year is a desktop monitoring. And that would include the quarterly progress reports. Every NGO that's funded by us must submit a quarterly progress report. We've got a standardized template. This progress reports look at when last was the AGM meeting, where's the minutes of the meetings. This report also looks at the income for that quarter from DSD, also what was the expenditure. We also ask usually then 3 months bank statements to confirm. Then if it's regarding the services, registers gets attached to prove that this services have been rendered to this client. So, for example, if we look at reunification of a child, the child's been placed in an alternative care system, and this child was then later on reunified with the family. There needs to be evidence of the correct forms that these children have been reunified, and that gets indicated on registers that comes quarterly with the progress report. So our M&E teams, besides looking at the progress report, we then also have a social work policy developer at head office that would analyze those progress reports. We would have people looking at the financial side of it. And then our monitoring officers would look specifically at the registers. So on the registers, we would look at the child's birth date, if it's correct. We look if there's duplication of names, because sometimes people do that by mistake or on purposefully. We'll never know. We also look at specific documentation to prove that that child has been reunified, or if a child has been removed, that there is a court order that has been granted. So that's all part of the desktop. And also part of the desktop is that we also look at the once a year, the audit financial statements of an NGO. So we've also got a specific team that would analyze your audit financial statements to look at the financial liquidity of the organization, and also for us to pick up red flags if this organization is in financial difficulty, because that would also be part of our interventions to see how we can support them, whatever that might be. On-site monitoring takes place in a 3-year cycle. So if you look at the MTech process is in a 3-year cycle. So going along with that is our monitoring that also goes with a physical site visit. So the teams usually have a yearly monitoring plan of who they're going to visit, when they're going to visit them, and who's the team members that's going to visit them. Now, that monitoring plans we sign off on chief director level. So on chief director level, we have taken that ownership to ensure that the organizations that should be monitored is on the list. Also, sometimes on that list, we pick up quickly a trend if there's a red flag by an NGO. Those organizations will be placed more regularly on the monitoring process. Then we notify the NGOs formally 10 days in advance that they're going to get an M&E visit. And we usually also request and indicate to them what kind of documentation they need to have available. And if it is social worker files, that we do not ask them to pull specific files. We pull randomly files of clients to check that. And that's why we've got the social worker part of the team. Then we've got another process, which is a quality assurance process. Now, your quality assurance process is usually with organizations that we fund 2 million rand and higher. Your quality assurance process is much more in-depth than a monitoring and evaluation process. Your first step in a quality assurance process would be that the NGO receives a list of questions and that they must do self-assessment. So they would go through their finance, their governance, their norms and standards, their health and safety issues, anything you possibly can think of, because it's quite a comprehensive. Our tools are very comprehensive, very detailed, and it's usually also linked to a specific regulation. If it's an older person's team, some of that norms and standards will be linked with the Older Persons Act and Children's Act and so forth. With the quality assurance, they would then do a self-assessment and they will score themselves a point out of 100. And then they send it to us, which we then look at, and then our team go in and do the assessment. To confirm, so it's got two functions. It makes an organization aware of what we're actually really looking by scoring themselves, and also to see how they look at themselves. What's their impression about themselves? And then our team will do their own scoring And if there's a misjunction between the scorings, we actually sit down then with them and say, listen, you've scored yourself now 5 out of 5 for your management meetings. Why would you do that? Why did you get that point? Because we got 4. So it will be a whole process of negotiating, talking, looking at evidence the whole time in that process. And then the quality assurance process, as I said, is a little bit longer. So that can take up to 5 days just with one NGO. Then, yeah, if there's a difference in ratings, our ratings and their ratings, the NGO we're also allowed to provide to give them additional proven evidence. If they say, but they now 5 out of 5 for this thing, that's okay, fine, cool. Give us then the evidence to prove that you why you say you're 5 out of 5. Then we also do financial inspections. That's specifically with organizations. When I'm monitoring teams, pick up potential red flags. And your red flag could be something like where you see, here is funds that's been spent, but there's not proper invoices, or there's something that just doesn't tally up the amount that they said that they spend. So we usually identify red flags, and in that red flags, if we've got any suspicion of mismanagement of funds or potential fraud, we will then send in another team, which also consists of M&E officers that's been trained specifically in financial inspections. And they will then go to that organization. It's usually about 3 team members, and they go back 5 years into the books of the organization. So they do a 5-year assessment of every single financial transaction with regards to DSD funds. As I've mentioned also, that we do an annual analysis of audit financial statements. Sorry, before I get to that, we then also do rapid assessments. So there's also sometimes a choice of where we decide we're going to do unannounced visits. So it's not always that we would do an announced visit with 10 working days notification. We do this specifically with the ones that we have picked up a red flag. And this could be on issues such as norms and standards, where we feel or we've seen, but yes, certain stuff with the kind of service that they render is lacking. It's not on the level it should be. Then we would have guided them how to improve their services. And then sometimes with those organizations, they are the ones we do rapid assessments. I'll give you another example. Before, when we used to have ECDs, one of the main things of an ECD is you get an occupational certificate from the municipality saying you're only allowed to have 50 children in this space. Now, we have picked up very quite often people overcrowd. They just bring in kids to make more money from the parents. It's those organizations we tell them, listen, here's your occupational certificate. You're going over your 50. Please start a process. Start engaging the parents, because these children need to be placed somewhere else. Then usually after that, that's when we do unannounced visits, where we will just knock the morning on their door and just say, we've talked to you 2 months ago about overcrowding, and then we count the children. And that's usually where processes can follow, where we can even go as far as to close down a place according to the regulations of the Act. After ample warning and yeah, so we don't just never deregister a place or close a place. It's a whole process of developmental approach, looking at how can we assist. The only thing obviously where we get a bit more vigorous is if we know there's fraud, then we will go in quite hard. On the annual financial statements, to give leeway to some of the NGOs, we do know that it's not cheap to do a audit financial statements to be prepared by professionals. So every amount below 600,000 Rand, if we give you funds below 600,000 Rand, you do not need to provide us an auditor's statement signed off and audited by registered auditors. It can be a report, financial and income expenditure report, done by a registered accountant. So the accountant must be registered by the board, or their council. So we require of them, and that's cheaper. That's cheaper than going to an auditor's company. So everybody above 600,000 rand, unfortunately, needs to have an auditor. We see the auditors' names, and also sometimes it happens they have to submit their audit financial statements by the 15th of December of a financial year. If they want extension, and sometimes it happens, we do allow extensions, but not by receiving a letter from the board of the organization. We want a letter from the auditor themselves, proving that this is genuine, legit, and what's the reasons why they're asking for extension. Then part of the desktop assessments, as I said, we do a scrutiny on the quarterly progress reports submitted by the NGOs. The due dates for every progress report is also stipulated in the contract, so they know exactly what dates they must provide their progress reports. The maximum what we do usually is give a week extension if an NGO has got a legit reason of not submitting. But I must say, we've in such a good stance with our NGOs in general in the Western Cape, it's hardly that any of them are ever late with their progress reports. They are totally on time, because NGOs also know, and that's one of the things, if we do not have your progress reports, we cannot continue to fund you for the next quarter. So it's not a punitive thing. It's just, sorry, this is one of our criteria. Before we fund you the next quarter, we need to see your quarter progress reports. It stands in your contract. So they are very much in the rhythm of knowing that if they are late with progress reports, the payment can be delayed with a week or two. And a week or two, so it's quite important to an NGO. It has effect on their salaries for their staff and stuff. So very, very much they are complying with that. Then we verify and validate the performance information they attach, like the registers that I've mentioned. Then assessment of the attainment with respect to targets, outcome, and activities. So in the report, they will also indicate we remove so many children. This is what we've done. This was our activities we've done. So that also gets analyzed. Now, every 3 years, we do a call for proposal that NGO needs to apply for funding to the department. So you do not automatically get funding every 3 years. You go through a full call for proposals. Currently we've got one running right now. It closes Friday for next financial years, next 3 years. In that process, they have to submit business plans, application plans. In that application plans, the NGOs themselves indicate what targets they would like to achieve, what's their outcomes, what's their activities, what's their own monitoring processes. All of that stuff we look at. So in the progress reports, if they're successful and they get a contract from us, we will also look at the business plan on a regular basis. Say, okay, so in your business plan, you've indicated this is the target you're going to achieve. So we would also compare that with the quarterly progress reports if they are actually achieving that. And then, as I've said, we're doing a scrutiny of the income and expenditure per quarter. So we look at that as well, and we ask for 3 months financial statements, bank statements, to prove the income and expenditure on DSD's budget. Also, what we do, they have to have a separate ledger account, so they don't have to have a different bank account. If they get funds from more than one organization, because sometimes some of them get funded by health department as well. Yes, it will all go into the same account, but they've got to have a separate ledger account just with DSD's funds. So we can actually look at the ledger accounts and trace the money easier of what they've received and what they've spent. So that is part of the contract too, that it's a must. They must have that. As mentioned, without going into detail, when we do the on-site monitoring, physically on-site, it will be our monitoring officer looking at financial governance, and then the social worker would look at service delivery standards. So there's also a post-monitoring process. So after we've monitored organization, what then? So we just leave them? No, we don't. It's the process after monitoring is a developmental approach. I mean, it's quite clear also probably if a person think, Why is this department called the Department of Social Development? Why are we not social services like old days? Because we've got a developmental approach to anything that we do with our clients and our beneficiaries. This will be even our monitoring processes. So we will look at, here's your monitoring, here's your report after we've done your monitoring, here's your gaps, here's your strengths. Now, let us look at your gaps to improve your delivery. We then develop a service delivery improvement plan. For short, we call it the SDIP. In that service delivery improvement plan, we would say, this is the gap that we've identified. This is what you must do to improve. Let me give you an example. We would do a governance assessment and we would see that they do not have a proper HR policy with their staff. Or it's not documented how they're going to do their recruitment processes with staff or training with their own staff. So usually you must have an HR policy to guide you on those processes, even on procurement. When they procure something, they've got to have a procurement policy. So we would come sometimes to a place and see they don't have an effective HR policy or they don't have a proper one. And then we would say, in our service delivery improvement plan, okay, fine, we give you 3 months' time to develop an HR policy. We're going to come and check again. What we usually do also, we also have best practices amongst NGOs. We sometimes can connect a NGO that's doing very well with their governance to assist that organization, or sometimes we even get a HR policy from another organization that gives permission. And then say, listen, here's an example of another organization's HR policy. Look at this, and maybe you should, when you develop your own one, which is one of your gaps, this is a proper one, how one should look. When non-compliance other than fraud is identified, the M&E team will then develop this SIDP or the Service Delivery Improvement Plan. We usually give them anything up between 3 to 6 months, depends on what kind of gap they have and what service delivery they need to improve. Some of the stuff you can do in 3 months, some of the stuff takes a bit longer due to our developmental approach. And then usually after that 6 months, then we would go do a site visit to follow up with those organizations. I must say, not often, but we do get, say, about 1% of the NGOs, even within that 6 months period, that still do not do that, or they haven't complied yet. It could be various reasons. It could be that they've got now a new board. So the new board needs to do things differently. So sometimes it can go up to a year that we sit with this organization looking at how must you fix this. So going back again to the fact that we are not punitive by closing you down overnight. We don't. Our approach is really developmental. Then within our department, besides our monitoring officers, we've also got an institutional capacity building unit, which falls under Mr. Hever, my colleague. So, and we've also got an NPO help desk. So when an NGO gets registered as an NPO, we don't do the registration. National Social Development has the competency, not the provinces, to issue a registration certificate for an NPO. But we've got a help desk where we would assist NGOs that applies to become an NPO. We follow up with our national counterparts. We've got access to the NPO management system, the national system. We can see if you're registered. We can see if you're not. We can even see if you have submitted your documents to national, because every year an NPO, to stay compliant and not to be deregistered by National Social Development, they need to submit their audit financial statements and their management report of that year. So this is all information that goes through to national, but we assist the NGOs with that to make it easy, because I mean, just think somebody from a province must phone national all the time to follow up their stuff. Sometimes the people don't answer their phones there. So we've got our own people here in the Western Cape that assist our NGOs to follow up on the registration status or any issues regarding that. Okay. Where we suspect fraud of an NGO. And I must say, it's improved a lot. If I think about 10 years ago, it's about 10 years ago, Robert, 8 years ago, we had quite a few organizations that we picked up fraud. Yeah, about 10 years ago. So I think with our capacity building, our monitoring process, our due diligence of checking progress reports, doing every year a desktop monitoring on their audit financial statements, on the criteria that they need to comply with. We've only had one last year. It was an old age home. But then we send it over after we've done our investigations. We send it to the province's forensic unit. So this province is got by the Department of the Premier, a provincial forensic team that consists out of people, legal backgrounds, qualified accountants, chartered accountants, and so forth. And that team will then, after we've provided them all our monitoring stuff, all our reports, all our findings, we actually hand over to the forensic team, and they will then conduct their own independent forensic investigation. If there is fraud confirmed by the forensic team, then it will be handed over to SAPS. Cases will be opened against that organization. If it is someone that's stolen money, usually those cases are opened by the NGO themselves. It could be their own accountant that stole some money. That's happened once about 4 or 5 years ago. But the NGO themselves open a criminal case against their own employee and fire the person. Where we pick up human rights violations and continuous health and safety non-compliance, we will then, after lots of negotiations and asking them to improve, terminate the contract. When it comes to the health and safety and a child being at risk, or even an older person, or even a disabled person, sometimes there's stuff that an NGO just does not improve after trying. And then when it is a serious risk for the safety of a child or an older person or any beneficiary, we do terminate then the contracts. We will even go as far as terminate your organization. I must say, if I look at this past few years, we have not terminated a lot because of the good standing we have with our NGOs in general. I think with the ECDs, we closed about 2 or 3 before they went over to education department. And I think 1 or 2 by us as well. But that's really after a lengthy, intensive process. What kind of support is available to the NGOs besides all this monitoring that I've been talking about? It must be noted that the department aids NGOs on request. So even they request us sometimes to support them. And the support can be that we give assistance with the registration of organizations. So, for example, an old age home, a rehabilitation inpatient center, ECDs when they were by us, after schools. These are organizations that must have an additional registration. So they do not only have an NPO Act registration or certificate, they've got to have a registration as an old age home. It's a lengthy process, separate process, where then the municipality gets involved. Because with that registration, there must be zoning rights. The bylaws must be complied with the municipality. There must be health and safety clearance from the environmental officer of the municipality. Occupational certificates needs to be issued by the municipality. So it's a joint project to register an old age home or a child and youth care center or an inpatient substance abuse treatment center, quite lengthy processes. But that's the support we provide to them. And part of that is that we would also see that they comply with norms and standards. We also, some of the programs needs to be registered. So besides your place having an NPO certificate or a registration as a child and youth care center, we also need to register your programs in the facility. That's what the Children's Act, for example, requires. So some places can have up to 3 registration certificates for various things. So if there's a program that's been done, it gets registered as well. So even the program and the contents of a program gets accredited or registered and checked up. So it's not only the building and the management of the building, but actually the physical program that's being rendered needs to be looked at. And then we also assist them with all this legislation. We would tell an NGO, listen, you are rendering our services, child protection services. Here's stuff in the Children's Act you need to comply with. Because a lot of people, unfortunately, and that's human nature, we all look at the part of a Children's Act or the Older Persons Act, in 5 of us have got 10 interpretations of that specific regulation. So it is our job to ensure that when you implement services to older persons, you understand the Older Persons Act correctly. Our teams are highly specialized. The teams we have at head office are people that usually were part of the developing these acts. So we have people that we send from the province to become part of the national task teams when they develop an act, when they develop national policies. When they do now, for example, we've got now the amendment to the Children's Act. We've got teams sitting on that national task teams. Right now, there was public hearings on the social services policy for people with disabilities. We were part of that national task team. So that's also where we as a province influences policy making in the country, or even stuff when it comes to completing regulations or legislation. So for that reason, we've got the experts in their fields, and they usually help the NGOs also to understand the legislation properly and not have a misinterpretation. We also even show the NGOs how to fill in your progress reports. So this quarterly progress reports I talked on earlier, especially if there's a new person that starts working for the NGO and this person gets the instruction, oh, they're going to submit the progress report to DSD. Then we pick up immediately, but yes, stuff not filled in correctly on our progress reports. We send it back to them. And then we say, listen, this part of the progress report you've not filled in correctly, or you've left out information. And that's usually then when we pick up, oh, it's a new person. We actually go out and go and show them how to fill in the progress reports correctly to save time, because filling in a progress report not in time is going to cost them being paid a little bit later that month. So we even do that. We even show them how to fill in their registers. So if I've got a list of clients that I've rendered service to, we even ensure that. Okay, we're almost finished. I know it feels as if I've been talking for hours. What is not within the scope of DSD? And I think this is something that we need to clarify up front today. A lot of people think that DSD is responsible for everything when it comes to the monitoring of an NGO. There's certain stuff we have no jurisdiction or legislative mandate about. What are those? Number one, we are not allowed to put a board together or appointment of board members of an NGO. We're not. These boards get elected in accordance with procedures in the NPO Act. DSD are not allowed to interfere with the appointment or firing of any board members of any organization. Staff. If staff has an issue, labor issues with the management, might it be salaries, might it be services, or whatever, legislation indicates that DSD cannot get involved with labor issues between an employer and an employee, because these staff are not our staff. They're not on our books. We're not paying their salaries. Yes, we can guide and say, maybe you should look at this, but usually the Department of Labor gets involved if there's labor disputes. Department of Labor is the correct department to deal with labor disputes, or even a union if there is a union at some of these organizations. Although a lot of them don't have unions, because if I look at specific places, some of them have less than 50 staff. So they don't necessarily have employment equity plans or stuff if it's below than 50 staff. So we can't get involved with staff's grievances. We can't get involved with the disciplinary process. So if a board decides to discipline their staff, we're not allowed to get involved. And if I look at this past 4 years, cases with DSD was taken to the CCMA because everybody said, oh, but it's your staff. The CCMA, every time when we appear there with an NGO staff, they kick the case out. The CCMA even says, sorry, DSD, you're not the employer of this organization, so you're not supposed to be here. Please leave. So even the CCMA is very clear, DSD does not have a mandate over any disciplinary procedures, firing, hiring of any staff of an NGO. Then also another thing that we are not allowed to get involved with is your admission criteria. So for example, an old age home, a disabled home, a child and youth care center, they've got certain admission criteria when they select or allow people to come and live in their place. We're not allowed to tell them what criteria they can use. We can check it and see if it is, what's the word, above board, if it is fair. If it's a fair, that's actually what I've been looking for. If it's a fair process, that we can look at. But we're not allowed to tell an old age home or a disabled home or any place that admits clients in a residential facility who they're allowed to and who they're not allowed to. We cannot. The board is independent, as stated once again. It's an institution that DSD's got no mandate over regarding those kinds of issues. That is that. The admission criteria was the last one. So yeah, thank you very much, Honourable Chair. I hope.
Thank you, Honourable Presenter, Chief Director. Quite a mouthful. Lots of information. So important to focus a bit on the entities receiving funds from provincial government, what they are doing with it, how they're dealing with the funds. Is not a case of providing them with a budget and we don't know where the budget goes to. Evaluation, monitoring, so important because it is state funding, it is taxpayers' monies after all. What I like of the presentation is the fact that it is not just a case of giving some funds, because NGOs coming from different community backgrounds and that sort of thing. Some knows exactly what to do, how to run their entity and that sort of thing. Some is not even educated and so on, doesn't have any form of qualifications and that sort of thing, but they fulfill a meaningful role in society. And I see them as a lengthening arm of the state, a lengthening arm of government. They can do what government can't do. Government can't do each and everything in society, in community. We need assistance. We need forms of entities to take a hand. But the issue with what I like we are doing is the capacity building mechanisms we have in place, not to leave them on their own, but to guide them, to assist them. And I think that for me is so important. I did indicate earlier we have a packed day today, so I've said enough. Let me open the floor. Anyone who look at the hands of honourable members going up. 4 of them. Let's start from this side. We can end with Honourable Bakenfos. Honourable Christopher Fry, you first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Jordan. It's well needed. I just have one question on with respect to health and safety. That I think it's slide 7. With regards to health and safety, you do an audit as to whether they do health safety, but do you provide specific do you provide specific funding for the development of a health and safety and environment officer on site? Is there specific, because that can be quite an expensive exercise for the NGO or the NPO, sorry. So do you provide that on site for the NGO so they can get a properly trained and accredited HSE officer? Thank you.
Honourable Barnes.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to the department for the presentation. Chairperson, I think my question is going to be a very direct question. When the presentation was going, I was following, especially on the part of monitoring and evaluation. And when I say I'm going to be specific, I'm going to say that for the past few months, we came back and forth with an old age home called the Eastpetscop in the central Karoo, Maritzburg. I think the last straw for us was to go and do an oversight ourselves as a standing committee here. Now, when you hear the responses from the department, actually the department is responding on a number of questions that we have sent to the department on a number of issues that we've seen with our own eyes and responses that we got from staff or issues that we've seen in the building. Number one, compliance would be one of the issues, unhappiness of staff, a number of issues. I'm not going to go to that because the presentation itself is kind of responding. But one, where you are sitting, you are asking yourself, when you are a government department funding, for example, NGO, like an old age home, compliance becomes a primary and you want to follow where your money is. How can you say that I cannot appoint a board? Yes, it's not within your scope. But if a board is there for 10 years already, it is not compliant. How does the department continue to fund an entity like that without questioning? Is there no form of measurement where you see that when you are doing the applications, this is the same board that has been applying for the 10 years. So therefore, there's no way we can continue giving money. I wanted to check on that. And also, a chairperson, the same NGO, after we've done our oversight, now I'm asking myself, how often does the department go and visit these NGOs? Be it a Eastpetscop, that is an old age home. I'm very passionate about the old age homes because it's about older citizens that cannot stand up and go and speak for themselves, same as children. So somebody must do and follow up what is happening to them. Now I'm asking myself, chairperson, after we have gone there, immediately you get responses that say that from the department, for example, we are not allowed to do the board. We are not allowed for salaries. One would have expected that to hear it already in the first engagement. This is what we do and this is what we do not do. But what I want to know, the primary people at the old age home that are the most beneficiaries, how are they protected with issues that are, because I believe even when money is going there, it's for them. How are we ensuring they are the beneficiaries? In conclusion, Chair, after our visit and after we have made recommendations and even written to the department, I recently got news that this old age home is closing because we went there as a standing committee. Now I'm asking myself, if they are closing because of things that we've picked up, have the department not seen it all along? If the department can just give us a clarity, and if they are closing, now they are saying 40 old age home people will be not having homes. They are nowhere. What is the department's role in all of this, except for Eastpetscop? How many other Eastpetscop issues are there? If we could pick it up in one, what is happening to the other old age homes and maybe other crashes that are not compliant? How do we monitor on? How do we follow where our money is? Thank you, Chair. And how are we keeping accountable the ones that are receiving government money? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The officials making notes of that. I think let's take the other two members as well. Honorable Windvogel.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, allow me first to apologize for being late. We've got lost. We sat in a meeting for more than 10 minutes and realized you are not the chair. Nomonde is not there. We recognize some of our colleagues in the meeting, but nevertheless, we are here.
I had some late morning breakfast. You may proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And allow me first also to welcome the presentation from the department. Chair, my question, actually, I'm partly covered by member Barnes. I think the department mentioned about they can't intervene when it's labor-related issues. I understand, but my understanding was you are supposed to make sure that the NGO is the NGO comply to all the regulations whenever you go into agreement with them. That was my understanding. Perhaps I've got it wrong. You can correct me, but that was my understanding. Whenever the department go into a contract with any NGO, NPO, at least they must comply to all the different regulations in if it comes to labor relations or whatever. Then secondly, Chairperson, I want to check on slide 5. I just want to check with the department, are there any specific reasons why these are on-site monitoring and quality insurance are conducted on a 2 to 3 years cycle and not annually or quarterly basis? And then what is a rapid assessment and is it conducted in all funded MPOs? And lastly, on financial inspections, are there any MPOs that have been red flagged in the current year? And if so, what are the relevant details? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Honorable Baku-Vos.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning to everyone. I welcome the presentation by the department, and it was mouthful. But I'm interested to know, Chairperson, in respect of the funds that have been transferred to the NPOs to date, are there any incidents of maybe mismanagement of funds and non-compliance that have been picked up? I would like to know that. And secondly, if there is, what mechanism are in place to prevent this to happen again? That is in slide 3. And in slide 4, I would like to know if is there a unit for monitoring and evaluation in the department, and if so, it is adequately staffed. Secondly, what are the skilled and education background of the assistant directors and admin officers, and how many of them have background in monitoring and evaluation? And we know we have many graduates with monitoring and evaluation in the province. And can the department at least utilize them if they are understaffed so that they can improve the monitoring evaluation techniques and plans for the department? Because the current methods are too basic, and this is a real concern because 1 billion is a lot for us not to take serious in this monitoring thing. And in slide 6, Chairperson, I want to know if there is any NPO that have not submitted quarterly reports in terms of scrutiny of income and expenditure. Is there a limit in terms of the amount of transferred that can be spent on salaries and goods of the NPOs? For example, Chairperson, through you to the department, we know corruption is rife in the NPO sector. Directors and their families are driving in expensive cars, both by the NPO. So how does the department prevent such things? Chairperson, this is my last question on slide 8. Although I want to know what is the number of cases that have been referred to the fraud investigation unit, and are the cases that have been referred to SAPS? And have there been any cases of termination of contract due to human rights violation? If we pick up such cases in our constituencies, where do we report them? The last one. In slide 9, there are many unregistered NGOs, we know that, and they are doing the work. I would like to know if the communities or those NGOs I would like to know if the department is helping those NGOs and NPOs to comply so that they can get the funding. Because really there are many of the organizations that are doing a great job, but they are not getting any funds. And when it comes to the, I'm listening to the response of the department when it comes to these things of salaries and what you call board members. I know there is a policy in the department itself that should be followed when it comes to board members, how many board members the NGOs should have, and those I know because I've been running a NPO before I've been a member of parliament. I know that you must have at least 6 board members of 5, actually, at least 5, yeah. And those board members cannot be your family, that I know. You cannot put all Bakus as the board members. Hence, you know, sometimes I want to make an example as the founder of the organization. As the founder of the organization, I know we went to the training, I think it was 2014, if it was not 2015, it was in Worcester, went to the training when we're told that being a founder doesn't mean you are in charge of the organization. This is not your property. This is the community thing. So if you have passion, at least draw in other people to work with you because this is not your property. So you can maybe you can have 1 Bakus in the board members because you are a founder, but not 2 or 3. That I know. So what we picked up in the, what do you call this thing? Old age home, 4 board members are coming from 1 family, and it's unacceptable. And what makes me sad is that the if it's true, I'm not sure if it's true, the old age home now is going to be closed, but we know they are doing a good job. Even when we're there, we said at least make sure that you have the board members that are eligible, and you must have a board of directors that is not like not only your family in the board members and the board of directors, because we saw that they are doing a good job, but they only need to comply with the DSD policy.
Thank you.
Yeah, that I soon am a chairperson. I'm not done yet. Call. And I want to plead to the department. If you are the one as the department, you are closing the old age home, you are wrong. I'm not saying it's you, but if it is you, yeah, we need that old age home, but they must just comply because there are many old people who need to be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable.
In closing, DSD is doing a great job for our family and community. I always say that, and I will always stand for that because I'm there. We are going to the ground. We see things. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think the one thing the 2 honourable members did not mention directly is if that home are to close down, what's going to happen to many old age people. And there's no other facility available in that area. I think that for us is a big worry. Okay, Dr. McDonald, HOD, you and your officials, maybe you want to kick off. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. I will answer some of the questions and then maybe also give the officials a chance to add where necessary, but I'll give Charles a chance to rest his voice as well. So firstly, the question from Honourable Member Fry, Chairperson, does DSD provide funding for an on-site health and safety officer for NGOs? No, we don't. We give them money for their operations. So if they need to have that service, they can include that in what they use the funds for, but we don't specifically give them money and say you must use it for a health and safety officer per se. So they can decide how they want to tackle that particular issue based on the money we've given them. But in most instances, they will probably outsource that type of thing, or they will nominate a staff member to do it. Same as we have in government, we don't have officials who are specifically designated to be as their only job occupational health and safety officers, but we do have officials who are trained and designated to do that as part of their work on top of what their existing responsibilities are. So NGOs can also follow a similar approach where they designate someone to do that role as part of their responsibilities, but not necessarily as their only role. Then the question from Honourable Member Barnes about monitoring and evaluation and the issues at Hayes-Spitzkop have been coming on for a long time. The department has been aware of the challenges there. I think it's been, I don't know how many years now we've been engaging the NGO, trying to help them. I think as Mr. Jordan had mentioned, social development tries to follow a developmental approach with NGOs. So closing them down is a last resort. We don't want to close places down that are doing good work. Even if they're not fully compliant, we try to help them to become compliant. The Public Finance Management Act says that we need to ensure a NGO has proper financial systems in place to account for the use of the funds that we give them. So that's the bare minimum. They must be able to account properly for the money that we give them. And then for our own policies, we then have certain requirements as well, that they must be meeting norms and standards and registration requirements. So for us, the non-negotiable is that they must be able to account for the money. That if they don't account for the money, if they don't submit their annual financial statements, then we have to stop funding them. By law, we can't continue funding them. But if they are complying with that, but they are struggling with other aspects, we do try to assist them before resorting to closure. But in the case of Hayes-Spitzkop, the closure was initiated by them, not by us. They took the decision to close because they can't they just can't seem to get on top of the situation there. I don't think they've got enough capacity to manage the place properly, even though they've tried over the years, and DST has tried to assist them quite extensively. They just can't. Sometimes NGOs get into that situation where the board and the management just aren't really able to do it. Sometimes people get older and they retire, and then there's no one who wants to step in, or there's just no one with the skills required in the area. So Hayes-Spitzkop is going to close now at their own initiative, but I'll ask Mr. Jordan to speak a little bit more about the way forward on that. So how often does social development visit? Yeah, okay, maybe we'll deal with it because there were quite a few questions on. So maybe we can just deal with the Hayes-Spitzkop questions in one go, Mr. Jordan.
You are very correct. I think what you've seen has been a concern to us as well. I think with the last resolutions of your site visit, we have provided quite a comprehensive response by the 31st of August with the service delivery improvement plans that we put in place in that home. I think it's also important to know, and you are aware of it, that they've got two organizations that's registered there, a non-profit company and an NGO. So it's two entities that's registered. The one thing for me, what is a concern with the non-profit company, that's in accordance with different legislation. It's not in accordance with the NPO Act. So there it's a question of total different processes that differs from an NPO processes. And I think sometimes that was probably used to their advantage by having an NPC there, non-profit company, which made it quite difficult. We have had quite a lot of visits there. We've talked to the old people, we've talked to the staff, we've interfered, and I'm going to say the word interfered because I think we've overstepped our boundaries sometimes as a department. That's why the two previous managers resigned there. because there was other two managers that the staff was also extremely unhappy about, also saying that those managers were very racist and had quite an attitude and stuff. So the previous two managers resigned of all the kind of pressure that we've probably put there. The situation is, as Dr. McDonald has said, we haven't asked them to close the place down. That would have been the last thing. If I look at the letters that I've received, it's not because of anything that has happened. It's purely financial. And so it's not because of the standing committee or anything. I mean, I think they got irritated with us too, as the officials being on the case. We sometimes would send even randomly the regional office. And I can even vouch that our other colleague that's not here this morning, the Chief Director for Regions, Ms. Annemie van der Renen, she once went to go and do also for me an unannounced visit there. I just said, what's going on there? Because I'm getting reports and stuff. I have been there myself. I know exactly how that old Dutch room looks inside. Ms. Goosen also went. So as 3 chief directors, we also did our own private visits there over a period of 4 years. So yes, there was issues. And I know the issues that you've raised, I think, yeah, you've seen stuff that we've seen as well. So it is not about our visits or your visits. The letter that I got, and I believe what they said, financially it is a problem. If I look at the bigger picture in this province, which concerns me, and I have done this presentation to the committee last year, March, exact, about my concern of the older persons program that's not received budget increases from provincial territory for 8 years. 8 years. So for 8 years, this department could not increase its subsidies to the older persons program, which is very hard soft for me. This means that salaries could not be increased properly in these NGOs. This means to me that they sometimes could not appoint registered nurses because the Department of Health don't contribute a cent to these old age homes, although it's nurses working there. I have reached out to our Department of Health and my colleague. At least they're providing the nappies, Department of Health. But financially, the money is just not enough. And honourable members, besides Spitskop, there's another 4 or 5 old age homes in this province, and I'm very concerned about that could close due to financial shortages, sustainability. So for me, that's been involved with older persons since 2005, full on. It's a dark period for me as well to see these things happening. So what do we do as a department? We have pitched every intake process. We've pitched for additional funds. We were not fortunate to get that money. I'm even now concerned, and HOD can confirm this, yes, looming budget cuts for the whole country. Every province, every department's going to get even bigger budget cuts now coming up now. That even concerns me more. So coming back to Spitskop, so I've insisted that the task team must be put in place. So I've got a task team of government officials plus the board members to look at a process of how do they exit. So not to do it overnight. I want it to be done in phases so that it doesn't disturb the older persons, unstabilize them. Mrs. Kromhout, the one person you've talked to, the one living in one of those little flats on the side with the psychological problems. We've even gone as far to get a space in an old age home in Oudtshoorn where there is a psychiatric nurse. There is not many psychiatric nurses in this country or even in old age homes. We've gone the other way. We've talked to her. Mrs. Kromhout has even got our cell phone numbers. We even talk to her on a regular basis. She phones us 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning to talk about stuff. That's how involved we've been. So I understand what you say about Mrs. Kromhout because I know you've raised it as part of your recommendations in your last site visits. Mrs. Kromhout, I know for 8 years. She stayed in another old age home here in Cape Town. She was okay at a stage, but then she refused to go for psychiatric assessments. Then she did. Then she refused to drink the medication. Then she phones me to tell me the Oppenheimers are her family. She's going to visit them in America. So that's the kind of stuff that we sit with. But she's a human being. So that's why we've enforced now and we talked to her and she's okay with it. The last time we talked to her, my team, she's okay to go to this old age home where there's a psychiatric nurse. Psychiatric nurse would be able to ensure that she drinks a correct medication, because she sometimes goes through things where she doesn't even drink a medication. The labor unrest, sorry, actually, I'm going maybe a little bit overboard, but I think the standing committee has been quite concerned about the old age home. So it's a very sad day. We are contacting the family. We've insisted that the family must be contacted to see where it's possible, where people have to go back to families, because that's the natural process. There is, however, going to be cases where their family can't afford it to take them back. So we will need to look, unfortunately, at the closest old age homes, which is Beaufort West. Beaufort West is the closest, which is 180 kilometers away, because there's absolutely no other place where they can go. My other concern is members. When that place closes, here is 28 staff members that's not going to have a job. They're going to be unemployed. That's going to have one direct impact on that community. So if I had the money, not me, Charles Jordan, but me as an official from DSD, I would have pushed in lots of money into all these places that we had identified. One of your questions is red flags of other places. Yes, there's about 4 or 5 red flags of old age homes specifically. Luckily, not actually with the disabled homes. Leona, you've got 2 by child and youth care centers. That's red flags regarding sustainability. In the child protection sector, because of lack of funding, we had 5 NGOs closing branches that rendered services to children. Your statutory work, your adoptions, your foster care placements, 5 of them closed, and there's more to follow. They just don't have the money. And we also don't. And that can maybe back actually to the one question that I can maybe also answer about, do we have a unit of M&E officials? Yes. We have in each program, older persons, disabilities, child protection, each one's got their own M&E officers. It's not enough M&E officers. So we've got 49 in total, but there's over 1,200 organizations. This was done with organizational development processes where that numbers have been given to us. Now, even with the compensation, that might be an issue that we're not going to get all our funding and posts are going to be frozen. If I've got a vacancy in an M&E team, I can't fill that. So that's going to put even more pressure on this department. The ideal process would be that we embark, and the HUD has put it on the list to request .p, because that's where the organizational development team is. That third party. We can't do our own OD process. Where we will look at how can we adjust these issues, because we need more staff, especially for monitoring and evaluation, because that has got to do, Chair, you're quite right, not only with the financial compliance of PMFA, but about the services that our communities get. So honourable members, I think that's in a nutshell about Spritscorp. We are part of the team. We will ensure as far as possible that these older persons will have a place to go, those that cannot go back to families. So I've got a very, very dedicated team. I've got Ms. Fortuin. She's my manager for older persons. She's been involved with older homes for 35 years. So she's one of our highly specialized staff in dealing with older persons. And I've also got our director, Ms. Patrice Moore, as a part of that task team. So I've gone high level, senior management to be part of that task team to ensure that processes go smoothly. But members, if I get money tomorrow morning, I will push that money in there to keep that place open. Yeah. Sorry, Chair. No problem.
There was also a question regarding the constitution of the NPO in terms of the board and all of that. There's a 2-tier process. National Department is involved with the registration of NPOs. So they are monitoring the constitution of that NPO in terms of how the board are compiled and so on. And we receive the list of organizations that comply with that according to them. And then we can only consider them for funding. So if there's non-compliance, it's because it slipped through the cracks at national office. And we can only highlight that to them, but we can't cancel the NPO registration on a provincial level. What we can do from our side is when there's non-compliance with norms and standards in terms of operations. So unfortunately, our hands on a provincial level is also tied with that. That's why we can't interfere, as we said in our last slide, interfere with how the boards are appointed and so forth.
Thanks, Mr. Hayward.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just wanted to also to mention something about the composition of the boards. That's a general statement that and experience is in the rural areas. There's a little bit of a challenge which we cannot ignore, that not everybody there is fit for purpose to be a member of the board and so on. You'll find out that in some families, which carry the developmental experience and so on, are more prone into supporting and helping the NPOs. So it's not when you find family members, it's not in all cases a situation where people are deliberately wanting to be on the board. It's a question where they are assisting. For instance, in Ebenezer, also in Maritzburg, we were funding an NPO there to provide food service, community nutrition and development centers. We found that the majority of the members of the board were family members. Without interfering necessarily, but we sat with that board, and they explained what the constraints are. As a result, we supported them to find other people who were also willing to be on the board, and we did it. So it's not a question that in all cases, there are cases where family members are imposing themselves. So I felt it's an important point to mention that one. And lastly, on the occupational health and safety issue, Honorable Frey, yes, we are not funding for occupational health and safety issues, but we do link the NPOs to other organizations that provide that training. For instance, municipalities, from time to time, they provide the occupational health and safety training, firefighting training, and our NPOs, including those in Maritzburg, Beaufort Wagons, in those small towns, we do link them so that when municipalities are providing this training, they also take them on board. There are other NGOs like the DTI that is also providing such training, and we link our NPOs so that they can participate. It's not that we do nothing because we don't fund them. We make sure that they do get the required capacity to be able to deal with the occupational health and safety issues. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Hayward. So I think some of the other questions, Chairperson, because there was like a lot. So I'll just try and make sure we don't miss any of them, if that's in order with you, Chair. So I think we've dealt with the questions from Honourable Member Barnes regarding Hay Spitzkop. And then from Honourable Member Windvogel, in terms of compliance, I did mention we've got the basic compliance we have to make sure is that they comply with the PFMA before NGOs are funded, and that they can account for money. And then also we look at what regulations they must comply with based on the service type. So if we're going to fund an organization for child protection, they must be a designated child protection organization, and those kind of things. I think to some extent we also have to look at their tax compliance, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and those things. But there are other areas of compliance that we wouldn't be able to necessarily try to enforce on them because it's outside of our role. So labour regulations and so on, I think we are, I don't know to what extent we have the ability to monitor their labour regulation compliance.
We can only alert labour.
We can, yeah, I mean, we can tip off labour, but we can't necessarily hold a gun to their head. But as I say, I think, again, it comes back to the point that we have to balance the interests of the beneficiaries as well, to make sure that we don't close places unless we absolutely have to close places, because unfortunately South Africa is a developing country, and a lot of people struggle to meet what are quite first world developed country type regulations. We have very aspirational regulatory frameworks in South Africa. In terms of the question of the 2 to 3 year cycle and why not annually or quarterly, we do adopt a risk-based approach to monitoring. As Mr. Jordan has mentioned, because we've got a limited capacity to do monitoring, we are not able to reach every single NGO every year. So what we do is the ones that are where we're picking up risks, we will monitor them more frequently and develop a plan for them there to rectify any kinds of non-compliance or service delivery problems. But the other NGOs that are doing well, that are solid, we won't have to monitor them as frequently because we are seeing that they are able to function. We pick up issues quite fast with NGOs if there is issues with service delivery, because our regional staff work with those NGOs all the time. So when they pick up that something's happening, then they flag it with us. Also, we've got community activists, we've got other NGOs, and we've got the municipalities that also flag things with us if they pick up something. And then, of course, a lot of the NGOs also work with the courts. So if there's NGOs that are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, for example, child protection, pick it up very quickly because the magistrates come to us and say this organization is late with their bringing their reports to court or whatever. So there's a good system of accountability built into the work that we are doing. And the community support us with that. The activists support us. It's a combined assurance framework, as it were. But I think in terms of where there are NGOs at risk, we do much more than 2 to 3 year visits. We'll do regular visits, even quarterly if we have to make sure that they are back on track, and that either we close them down or we get them working properly. In terms of rapid assessments, I think that is something that's done where the risk is low, and we just do a check to make sure that all the vital signs for that NGO are working and that they are compliant. So where we do more in-depth assessment is usually a multi-day assessment where we get into the case files and we start looking at the quality work, and that's the more in-depth monitoring that's done also with the higher risk organizations when we pick up problems. Are there any NGOs that have been red flagged in the current year? Yes, there are. I think, though, that we would have to provide that detail probably in writing because it's too much to respond verbally. But sometimes we pick up NGOs of financial trouble, so we put them on the risk radar. Sometimes it's because of non-compliance. So it depends. There's different reasons why we may pick that up. In terms of the questions from Honourable Member Baku Vos, are there any incidents of non-compliance or misuse of funds? I think Mr. Jordan did mention last year we had a case. There are cases currently with the SAPs, and the committee is, I think, also briefed every year by the Provincial Forensic Services on the status of those cases. I think it's SCOPA that gets that, but the standing committee here can also receive updates on the status of those SAPS cases. So I must say they're not moving very fast. There are a number of cases with SAPs that were reported over the years. Some of them go back many years. They haven't really moved much, unfortunately. So at the moment, though, the number of cases of misuse of funds is very low. We don't get a lot of those issues at the moment, thankfully. We do have measures in place to prevent this. As we mentioned, the quarterly reports must come in with the information on service delivery and how funds are being used. We must get the audited financials annually. As soon as we don't get audited financials, funding is withheld. And also, if we don't get our quarterly reports, funding is withheld. So we've got mechanisms in place to make sure that NGOs are compliant. And the minute we pick up non-compliance, then we put a stop to the funding and we send in the investigation team, starting with the M&E team, using internal control unit in the department if necessary, if we pick up something that looks untoward of a financial nature, and if necessary, then Provincial Forensic Services if there is evidence that there's fraud, and that's at .p, the PFS unit. Also, we do have our inspectorate at social development, where if we pick up issues of severe non-compliance with norms and standards for social work or other service delivery, then we have our inspectorate to have a look at it as well. So we've got a few mechanisms in place to pick up these issues. I think we spoke to the M&E unit question from member Baku Foss. The use of graduates for M&E. We do have some social work graduates that are assisting the program officers, but that's still, we still have to use salaries for them. So with our current crunch on budgets, and particularly with compensation of employees, we wouldn't have the room to bring on anyone else at this stage. In terms of the question about NPOs not submitting their financial statements, at the moment, do we have any cases? Not. So we're all compliant at the moment with financial statements. Is there a limit to what can be spent on salaries? Yes, we do stipulate that there's a certain amount that can be used for salaries, but then they must also make provision for administration costs and other things. So we do give guidelines as well about what the minimum salary should be too, because we don't want staff being underpaid, because then they have high staff turnover. So that we've changed that though, because it's now, it's not in the TPA anymore, because the Auditor General doesn't want us to be too prescriptive. So we've lost some of the grip we had on that. In terms of directors spending money on themselves, I think that goes to the question of picking up misuse of funds. Where we pick up that receipts look fabricated, or if there is a lack of receipts for money, or if there's cash withdrawals, which we don't provide for, then that's immediately investigated by the department. So that's also how we pick up if directors are misusing funds. In the past, we saw that, where we had directors withdrawing cash and things like that, and we've clamped down very hard on that, and we don't have problems with that any longer. In terms of number of cases referred to PFS and SAPS, as mentioned, we referred a case last year to PFS. This year, PFS has received a case directly from a whistleblower at an NGO. So there is one case with PFS at the moment relating to Sanka, Western Cape. We don't know whether there's any merit to it or not, but PFS has indicated, Provincial Forensic Service has indicated that they will investigate, do a preliminary investigation to see if there's more to it. So they are busy with that, and we are also looking at this issue. But it does, that seems to be a staff member or former staff member. So we don't know yet whether it's a staff member who had left on bad terms and now they are angry with the NGO, whether there's actually a real issue. We can't tell yet. We haven't had enough info. That only came in last month, I think, or 2 months ago. So we haven't had any feedback yet from Provincial Forensic Services as to the merits of that case. That's the only NGO-related case currently with PFS this year. Have there been any cases of termination of contract due to human rights violations? And where can you report such cases? You honourable members can report such cases to social development. We will certainly investigate. We do, as I mentioned, have an inspectorate unit at social development to investigate such things, and also the program officers themselves investigate this. So have there been any NGOs that have been, the funds been terminated due to human rights violations? I don't think recently we haven't had any. We have closed down NGOs for human rights violations, particularly in the substance abuse centres, which were doing some extremely harsh things to their clients. And that was in the news. We did go to the High Court to obtain court orders to close down those centres because of the inhumane practices and breach of registration requirements. The question from Honourable Member Baka Force about unregistered NPOs and what assistance we have. I think Mr. Hewu spoke briefly that we do have a unit, NPO support desk at DST, and also our local offices do assist NGOs get registered. And every year we assist hundreds of NGOs to get registered. But the registration process is national. So we assist, connect them with national, guide them how they can apply and what they need to do, and talk them through it and assist. And then the team at Mr. Hewu's unit also does training sessions and capacitation sessions in a more in-depth way with the NGOs as well. The number of NGOs we support with registrations is actually recorded in our annual performance reports, in our annual reports, in terms of the numbers assisted. So I think then that is the last question from the Honourable Member Plato, the chairperson. What will happen to the older persons? I think Mr. Jordan did speak to that. We're busy now trying to find placements, alternative placements for the older persons at Spitskop with the closure coming. So most of them will either need to go back to family or they'll need to go to another home in the vicinity. In some instances, the movement is not too bad because they don't have any family in the vicinity, and if they move, it doesn't affect it. But it's always hard for older persons to move because they get used to the routine and the safety of their surroundings. So it's never a good option unless we have to absolutely have to do it. But thank you, Chair. That's the question.
Thank you.
Questions?
One question. You make.
Yeah,
I think Member Baka Force asked that. So our monitoring teams, the social workers, they are qualified social workers and they're registered with the South African Council for Social Workers. So that's their qualifications. The monitoring officials, it varies from diplomas and degrees in public administration, finance and governance. But I must also add that we have put them through various monitoring and evaluation training programs as well. So the Department of the Premier by the Training Academy in Kromeria, they've also got sometimes monitoring and evaluation courses that we've sent them up. And also sometimes if there's programs offered by universities, then we offer it there at Kromeria for our officials on monitoring processes. Thanks.
Thank you. Before I allow another round of comments or questions from the honourable members, just a caution to the department with regard to Spitskop and the possible closing down of that facility and movement of those people to Beaufort West, to Huis Johannes. The visit to Huis Johannes was a very good visit, but also, stroke horrible visit, if I can put it to you like that. Manager not present when we arrive to leave us up with the subordinates. But this condition of that facility, I just need to caution about that. Not up to standard. The floor's dirty, the bedding dirty, not actually real bedding. Nappies next to the kitchen. At the back door of the kitchen, a pile of nappies. We could identify that. It was not a happy kind of a visit. We express ourselves in such terms to the management present. I think there's a lot of catch up to be done with regard to that facility. It's a facility not up to standard, if I can put it to you like that. So it was good. The monitoring was good. The visit was good. And I think maybe lastly from my side is looking at the budgets they receive from the department, much higher than all the other homes in that area, even much higher than that of Spitskop. And the manager or in charge at the time, first comment was, when are you going to up our budget? Because the staff want a higher salary. Well, they have the right to say that and that sort of thing. But if you have what they receive versus what others receive versus what they provide to the elderly, they got a lot to catch up about that, because they are not doing what they are supposed to do. And I think all of the members was in a state of distress with regard to what we have seen at that facility. I think the members will agree with me. Any further comments? Any further questions from the honourable members? You are most welcome. Member Barnes, thank you.
Chair, thank you. Maybe just a comment, Chair. I must say that
Just one, Member Barnes, just my apologies for that. Sorry for doing this. There's some coffee and tea outside. You may help yourself with regard to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Once again, I must say that from the side of the department, I'm maybe just a comment. I must welcome the interaction because Beaufort West is my constituency and Maritzburg is my home. So I understand, I have an in-depth understanding of what's happening. From our visit to now, I can confidently say that I could feel the steps of the department and their intervention. Things are happening. What is, what was expected, it was happening. However, Chair, in the near future, maybe something that I would want the department to look into, hence I put the question of saying, following the money, is where we put our money as a government. There's not always 100% willingness, and I speak it boldly, of cooperating with government, especially with the case of a Spitscope. So the first time I hear now that they're closing because of money. I understand the money challenges. I know I've been following. Hence, I said we cannot put it as a Spitscope problem. It's a problem all over. But the part of the building that is theirs, because when I got the report, it was they are taking back their property. They don't want to account. And we've asked too many questions. So I think for future purposes, it won't stop today with the Spitscope. Wherever we invest or put money of government money, there must be some kind of agreement. When the building is yours, you must unfortunately account where ratepayers' money are there. Yes, we are binded up to here. We cannot decide for you who will be a board member or who will not. But it cannot be a matter of it's my building, so therefore you won't question me. It cannot be a matter of that. All right. And at the end of the day, people are suffering. Older people are going to be without their families now. I know there are children, even there's a child that is paralyzed that sees siblings every day. His mother can't take care of him. Oh, he has to go into another life. There are so many other consequences. So I think something really that we should look into to the near future or into future is when we are funding NPOs like that, the impact of saying the agreements between them and the department. It's a matter of looking into, because I think it's quite a lesson learned. There was a better way to deal with the matter, but this is our building, so you don't come and talk too much on our property. I've picked that up. We can't run away from it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just your mic, please, just to capture what you are saying.
Ek dink die HOD, I'm not sure if it was the HOD. No, it's Mr. Jordan, sorry. He mentioned about the budget cuts and funding. I just wanted to check with the department because I can't recall. In terms of surrendering funds back to Treasury from your department, was there any? Because I can't recall now.
Actually, if I can answer, yeah, on the transfers.
Was there any money the last financial year? Come again?
Compensation budget. There was some of our budget for salaries we had to give back to the department because remember Treasury. This thing, yeah, there we go. Okay, so Treasury has a rule at the moment whereby they give us a fixed amount for compensation of employees that we have to use only for that. And if there's any of it unspent, we can't reprioritize it. So there was some funds that were underspent on compensation that we did have to surrender to Treasury at the end of the financial year. Transfers, I think by and large we used up. There was probably, I don't know how much it was.
That was a small amount of, I think, just a little over 1 million, honourable member, but it was NGOs that was non-compliant the last quarter.
Yeah, so,
we could not continue funding them because of the non-compliance.
yeah, so it was funds that were allocated that had to be given back because the NGOs didn't comply, so we couldn't pay the lost amount. So there was a small amount of transfers, but the bulk of the underspend, I think there was, I'm not sure the exact number now, but it wasn't a huge amount, but there was some compensation of employee funds that we returned. I think it was less than,
After the adjustment budget.
yeah, I think it was probably like 0.7% of our budget underspent, 0.7 something.
Are you saying you can't redirect the money during the adjustment budget?
Yeah,
Or
they don't allow you to redirect COE compensation funds generally. If we ask them in the adjustment budget, they might sometimes accede to that request. It depends. But compensation is a difficult one because, as we've always noted, we have a lot of the time we have people leaving unexpectedly. They get a transfer to another department, or they just resign. We've got a bunch of people resign in the last year, which makes up about 7 months of this financial year and about 5 months of last financial. We've lost 200 people that have just left. So that then leaves you with underspending, which you can't quickly replace because you can't fill posts straight away. It takes you months to recruit people and advertise and vet them through the criminal system and everything. So unfortunately we can't fill posts as fast as we're losing people right now. So yeah.
You're covered, honourable member. Thank you very much. Okay, no further questions then. Let me use the opportunity to say thank you to the officials, Dr. McDonald, you and your staff, and the manner in which you have answered the questions. We appreciate that. May I then at this point in time ask the officials to exit the room, please? Have a wonderful day ahead of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, honourable members.
There's some refreshments outside. Yes, we can take a quick 2.5 minute break. Ek wil net gou in jou oor fluister.
Been hold it up until the elections. We'll come back next year with the full. And it's the permanent director of opinion. Who is it in charge of?
When about what?
About this.
Which verse?
Okay, guys, emanating from the presentation we had from the officials, are there any resolutions from your side as members focusing on what we have heard from the officials? I think from my side, I made one or two notes. If we can, they identify the problem with regard to budget, and I fear what they have said, a decrease in budget, that might impact on the functionality of some of our NGOs. And the recommendation should be that the Department of Social Development management will have to do everything at their disposal to prevent budget cuts to impact on NGOs severely. How they're going to do that, I don't know. You may go.
Thank you, my chairperson. Yeah. For me, this year is the year that even a new what do you call organization can apply for funds. For me, I would say if they can at least keep all those functioning organization that is with them now. That's my recommendation. More especially in the rural areas and even in the metro. But they must keep it instead of all of those are complying. Ne? And instead of closing some of it, it's better for them to reduce amounts that they give those organizations. But if they can continue to fund the same amount, they must do so. If they have maybe top up, it's better for them not to top up those, to look at the new ones on those funds.
Okay, I think these two recommendations from your side, Honorable Baku, and my side is for me of the most important aspects. Because if they are not going to be cautioned with regard to the budget issues and the possible decrease in budget, I don't want to see what's going to happen to some of the institutions. Yeah.
Just for clarity, Chair, are we saying that they must not adopt, I'm going to call it adopt new NGOs? Is that what you guys
I don't think that is what Honorable Baku for saying.
I'm saying, listen, Rachel, I'm saying if they don't get more money to fund organizations, than closing those who are operating now, they better not to take new ones.
Okay, you are right.
That answer your question.
I support.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's it. I think that is the only recommendations from our side regarding these presentations. Okay, let's move then over to the adoption of the following committee documents. You receive your sets of documents. I'm with the one of Tuesday, the 11th of April, 2023. And that was acting chairperson Gillian Bosman in the chair. And it's for Gillian Bosman to sign that one off. He is with us in the meeting. Gillian, that is a fair reflection of what happened at the meeting. Thank you. Gillian, agree. Thank you. And then Tuesday, the 25th of April. Minutes.
Jay?
Yes.
Someone.
Oh, I didn't ask for a seconder, and that's sorry. I always does that. I forget. There's a mover and a
seconder.
Seconder. Thank you. Baku for second. Meeting Tuesday, 25th of April. I'm okay with, I read the minutes yesterday already. I'm okay with the contents of the minutes. Bakuforce move and
Price.
Second.
okay, thank you. We got
I
that.
don't want to be second for this one.
Meeting of the Tuesday, the 23rd of May, 2023. I'm also happy with the set of minutes. A mover and a seconder. Gillian move and Fry second. And then the last one, the last two you see is the annual activity reports. I'm happy with the contents of the activity reports. I've got no problem with that. Can we somewhere adopt both of them?
Baku move.
Baku move and Christopher Fry second. Okay, there's no other resolutions and actions you want to table, honorable members? No. So may I then say this meeting is then, which one is that? Yeah, I think we adopt that one as well. Yeah, we said both of them.
Oh, both of them.
Yeah, together. The I knew that Gillian Bosman is naughty. He is absolutely naughty this morning. When I'm the national minister, I wish to be national minister. Okay. The final mandate of the fundraising amendment bill, B29B stroke 2020, NCOP. The chairperson to refer to members to the documentation received from the NCOP in response to the committee mandate that was submitted to the NCOP Select Committee for consideration. Chair, to remind the committee that in principle the committee supported the bill with few amendments. I think that is important that I raise that with few amendments. The committee should now decide whether to support or not to support the bill. The committee must remember there is no option of further amendments. It supports or not support during the final mandate stage. If the NCOP permanent delegate is present in the meeting, he must be given an opportunity to report back regarding the negotiating mandate meeting. But many of you, or let me say of us, did attend the NCOP meeting online pertaining to the bill. After discussions, the chairperson submits the committee final mandate report for adoption, saying, let me get it from the honorable members here present. Are you supporting? Are you not supporting? Gillian Bosman says no, he's not supporting.
Yeah, we are supporting the bill with the amendments.
Support.
Support with amendments now. It was just support, but not support.
We support the bill. Thank
Yeah,
you very
and
much.
you, I
Chairperson.
think that is the majority of the members support. After discussion submits, the chairperson submits the committee final member the report for adoption saying the standing committee on social development having considered the subject of the fundraising amendment bill B 29B/2020 NCOP referred to the committee in terms of standing rule 217 recommends that the House confers on the Western Cape's delegation in the National Council of Provinces the authority to support the bill. Okay. Report to be considered means the report will be considered by the House. And we then support, so it is considered, and that is then done from our side. Okay. That's the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
I just want to check from Nomonde. For me, it was appropriate for me to read that whole script.
Yes.
Okay, that is done. The secretariat agreed.
Chair, sorry, Chair. I
Yeah.
think the committee must adopt the report because
Oh,
initially,
okay.
yeah, just to adopt the report.
That is double. It's double supporting because we did say we support. But okay, can I have a mover for support adoption? Okay, comes member Barkofors and member Christopher Fry second. Thank you. That is then done. Table. Meeting adjourned.